Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston with Our Blooming Catholic Life, and we're here today with a peek inside Wayne Erbsen's Log Cabin Pioneers, Stories, Songs, and Sayings. If you've watched any of my reviews of his books, you're going to know these are interwoven. It's sort of like a living history book. If you want to learn anything about American log cabins, that time period, what they are now, it's a really fun read. As like all Wayne's, he somehow weaves information and humor together, and it's just delightful. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm glad to have this actual book. These are something I look for when I go down to the Smoky Mountains. I'm like, does he have a book out that I don't have? Because, well, I'm just dying to learn more. I always love local history books, and his are always a delight, except for that thing about murder ballads. Disclaimer, murder ballads, don't read about them before bed. Sorry. It's not like they jump out at you from behind a bush, but if you already know about murder ballads, you might be fine. If you're really curious, it's in some of the bluegrass books. Log Cabin Pioneers, Story, Songs, and Saying by Wayne Erbsen. He has here a quote saying, "The reason we have so few great men nowadays is that there are so few log cabins for them to be born in." This was published in 2001 by Native Ground Music out of Asheville, North Carolina. The table of contents. You know I love nearly everything about his table of contents, but even his titles, they just don't tell you everything. So don't take anything quite at face value. You'll understand more as you go along. The only thing I would do differently is I kind of wish that these big things, they're in all caps. I kind of wish they were bolded. But you can see there's many short little features in here, right? Tons of short little features. So there's the foreword, cabin history, pioneer construction. And like while it says pioneer construction, there's plenty of funny stories in there as well. Log cabin music, whiskey making, cabin kids, home and cooking, pioneer beauty secrets, log cabin ghosts and lore. This is they're kind of like Foxfire, but with Wayne being one person who has collected all of these stories and interwoven them with his own adventures. That's a great way. I know I'm using interweaving a lot, but it's just so many things at the same time. And that's one of the reasons I love them. It starts out with The Trail to My Own Cabin. It was the songs about log cabins that first captured my attention. As I was learning to play banjo, the fiddle, and the guitar nearly 40 years ago, I was drawn to the songs about log cabins. Perched high on a hill, a log cabin was something real and yet mysterious, something worth singing about. Of course, I eventually went on to learn a wide variety of American folk music. Still, songs about log cabins continue to hold a special fascination for me. Perhaps my own interest in log cabins had more than a little to do with the fact that I grew up not in a humble cabin, but in a comfortable home in Southern California. Singing about cabins and the lifestyle they represented took me far from the city lights of California to the remote mountains of North Carolina and Virginia. As I began learning this music, I became more and more fascinated with the old-time lifestyles and the folklore of the people who grew up in pioneer settings. Even as I was delving deeper into music and lore of early America, I began studying American history in an academic setting. First, I earned a BA degree in American history at the University of California at Berkeley. I then went on to graduate study in history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I earned a master's degree. It wasn't until my first semester of graduate school that it dawned on me my deep interest in American folk music was but part of a deeper interest in history. My hobby of folk music and my academic studies all came together when I admitted to one of my history professors that I played music. An avid folk music fan, he offered me a deal I couldn't refuse. Instead of writing a massive term paper on labor history like the rest of the class, the professor proposed that I get up in front of my classmates and sing old labor songs from the IWW, better known as the Industrial Workers of the World. Since my mama didn't raise a dummy, I readily agreed. While the other students were struggling with writing a huge research paper, I got off easy by merely bringing my guitar to class and singing songs like Solidarity Forever, Union Made, and a number of songs by the legendary IWW songwriter Joe Hill. The teacher was delighted, the class had a break from another boring lecture, and I had a light bulb go off in my mind. Forever after, my folk music and my American history interests were merged. it just speaks to me. This is so much of like how I operate and what I do that could be why I love these books. And I am famous for, even in elementary school, getting away with things like this. In third grade, we were supposed to write down, I believe it was in our journals, if you had those in school. In third grade, we had these journals. It was to practice handwriting, and we were told we had to copy off the board the first verse of the Star Spangled Banner. So, of course, the second the other student started, I went up to the teacher's desk and I said, if I stand here and sing to you the first 3 or even 5 verses of the Star Spangled Banner, can I get out of doing this? And she just looked at me and went, okay. I was the kid who showed up the first day of school with a stack an inch or two tall of reports that I had done over the summer. I love learning, but I love learning about people and history and all kinds of things. These books are just how I learn. That's a great deal of homeschooling, is doing unit studies where your language arts and your math and your music, everything intertwines. If you were a homeschool student in the last 2 decades, you have probably done a timeline, a giant timeline that spanned the wall of an entire room. And every time you learned something new, you wrote it on the timeline. So your music, your art, your politics, world history, animals, like everything was on one giant timeline. Some parents do it where each kid has one in a giant notebook that is, each one has like a decade or something on a page of a notebook that you write them, and you carry it throughout your school career, starting, seriously, no joke, in kindergarten. And so it ties all these things together. And that is kind of the flavor of these books. It ties a lot of different aspects together. He tells you the trail to his own cabin. Let's see, that's the next page. I do want to show you, besides the photos interspersed throughout, it's one thing that is not my favorite. I totally get why they do it. They need to keep space. There's a bunch of hyphenated words as they work their way around photos. That's not my favorite technique. It works here, but, you know, it takes a little bit more focus to read than a full page of text. These are a bit easier to read, even though they aren't justified. I would love it justified, but whatever. Down here, there's almost always some kind of little quote at the bottom of the page, in italics as well. He says, the music did more than focus my interest. It made me realize I was living in the wrong place. And he actually went, it does tell you how he got his own cabin and tried to figure out how to fix it up. It is lovely. I'm going to jump. One of my favorite sections is chinking and daubing. And he tells you that when the early settlers finished building their temporary cabins, they rarely bothered to fill the space between the logs. More important tasks awaited them, like putting food on the table. There was land to clear, gardens to plant, and wild game to hunt. After they had built a more permanent log cabin, most pioneers eventually chinked. Chinking means filling the space between the logs with stick, bark, wooden wedges, rocks, moss, or practically anything could be used to stop the airflow into the cabin. So I'm going to stop and show you here. It's this line here. So this is a wooden, right? This is a big wooden log. It can be a plank. It can be a flat one, round one. It doesn't matter. But this is the wood, and in between the wood is the chinking. These gaps can be bigger or smaller. Why don't you want to put the wood flush? The wood will shrink and grow depending on the humidity and settle in a little bit. So the chinking is a way to continually adjust that. But you want to have something in there. So that's why it's mixed materials in there often. It does say, well, when nails were readily available, some log cabin builders drove nails in between the logs to hold the next layer, which was called daubing. Daubing was a mixture that often saw clay and straw with a healthy dose of cow manure added for good measure. When it came time to rechink my own cabin, the old Crawford place, I found everyone I talked with and every book I read had a different idea about the proper recipe for a good daubing mixture. To learn how the locals in Big Pine, North Carolina chinked and daubed, I consulted with my banjo-picking friend and neighbor, Jake Owens, who lives nearby in a log cabin he built with his father, fiddler Malcolm Owen. Jake's advice was as good as gold. Make your daubing the mixture, the consistency of dog poo. Faced with the task of chinking my own cabin, I wondered what the recipe was that was originally used in daubing this cabin. When I looked between the logs, I could see sticks, various pieces of wood, rocks, and rusty nails that had been driven in between the logs. I was puzzled as to why the mud daubing was gone from between the lower logs, but fully intact between the upper logs. The answer came from the previous owner who had rechinked the cabin when he lived there in the mid-1970s. He admitted that he used an old daubing recipe that included salt in the mixture. Oh no! What a huge mistake. He allowed one of his neighbors to pasture cattle on his property. Dun dun dun. Hungry for salt, the cattle licked out every bit of the daubing between the logs they could reach. They even climbed up on the porch to get the delicious salt morsels there, and in the process, they had broken the porch all to pieces. After I became friends with the neighbor whose cows had dined on my cabin, I teased him about the chink-eating cows. I even accused him of eating part of my cabin himself, because he probably ate some of the cattle that had chewed on my cabin. He laughed and denied eating any of those cows, but when I see him, I can't help but think that inside him somewhere is a part of my cabin. Give it back! There's so much fun. Like, you can see here, he gives you knowledge, but he does it in such a fun way. Don't you wish all of your teachers had been like this? And again, he tells you on building, how did he build his stairs? How are you going to do that? It's great. And then there's some breakout boxes that are shaded a little bit more. Confessions of an Outhouse Digger. And here is even the outhouse song. And by that, I mean, he really gives you the song. He works it in with the history, and it's in here. Really great. Yeah, just like in the other book, Learning the Fiddle from the Devil himself, they're going to share that kind of story that comes through. Fiddling David Crockett, Thomas Jefferson Fiddler. See what I mean? Everything's interwoven. Fiddling Bill Hennessy, the Virginia Reel, according to Mark Twain. So now we've pulled literature in. Oh, there's a tiny mistake here. We had here the Virginia Reel, according to Mark Twain. And when we turn the page, it says barn dances continued. So this was kind of about barn dances, sort of, maybe, if you're really stretching it. But see how this one doesn't have continued? These just got swapped. Notice that may happen. I think there's like one other place it happened. Oh, there's a note here. There's mention of a dulcimer. We're on page 69 in the middle of the article on log cabin singing. Sorry, I mowed the lawn earlier, washed my hair, and then came up. So it's like ridiculous right now. I apologize. Anyway, we're on page 69. Our modern attitudes towards singing are in stark contrast to that with our log cabin pioneers. To them, singing was as natural as talking, as breathing. Young and old all sang. Sometimes families sang hymns together around the hearthside or piano, but most singing was done by individuals as they went about their daily lives. See, I'm like behind the times? I don't know. Ahead of my time? Behind my time. If you've been around me, I annoy my son immensely with this, singing all the time. I think I sang at a neighbor yesterday. She didn't really flinch, but there was a little bit of a look. Anyway, kids sang in school, and the girls always sang jump rope rhymes during recess. Farmers sang when they plowed, worked in the fields, or mended fences. Women sang while performing their daily chores. For these women, singing was not just to pass the time, but also a way to let their young children know where to find them in the house or yard. See, I have to tell my son, I'm just being helpful. In the early pioneer days when instruments were rare, people sang because it was the only music they had. But even after instruments became common, a strong singing tradition continued. It was the women who tended to do more of the singing, while menfolk played the instruments. This was particularly due to pioneer attitudes. Instruments like the fiddle or banjo were widely associated with the devil. The proper instrument for a woman was the piano, the dulcimer, the guitar, or the zither. Zither's fairly related to the dulcimer. Makes sense. These are all string instruments, but so are the fiddle and the banjo. I wonder why these were acceptable for women. I don't know. A woman's main instrument was her voice. Many women knew hundreds of songs by heart and took pride in being able to remember all the verses of ballads like Barbary Allen. If you ever look at historical songbooks, they have so many more verses, and there's so much rich history and literature woven into them and just everyday life than our modern day songs. Yeah, that's why I love these kind of songs. Here's another one where that continued got switched as to which page had it. The singing schools. It is a great tradition. If you've not read about them yet, you're going to want to. So Barbara Allen, it does give you 2 full pages of verses to go with that super simple tune. And it even tells you that as a boy, Abraham Lincoln sang Barbara Allen growing up in Indiana. So great history here. The next one is about the Blackest Crow. It says, among the ballads collected in the North Carolina mountains in 1916 by English folk song scholar Cecil Sharp was My Dearest Dear. Carl Sandburg titled it The Lover's Lament in his 1927 book, The American Song Bag. I have to get that book. It is also known as The Time Draws Near, but most people now call it The Blackest Crow. The next page is a story about one tough hog. And then there's Darling Corey. This one gives you quite a bit more. It gives you one whole page about this and then gives you a song. You know me, I love the songbook part, but even if you don't do the songs, there's so much history about American pioneers in here. It's just lovely. I kind of wish every culture had these kinds of books. Wayne, if you get bored, go on vacation somewhere and do this. I'm just saying. It's a thing. Then we get back to the back section. Has things like the general store. Again, these got swapped. It's not that big a deal, but it may stand out to you. A Tale of Two Chickens. It's just a fun little story. And then we have recipes. Chicken pot pie with sweet potato crust. The recipe's here. Around the Hearth, our first cook stove. So back to the author, weaving his own story in with these. Borrowing Fire, the Stove Wood Box. Turkey in the Molasses, which is, that is about a song, I think. Song story. Oh my goodness, that's a story. It's a story told by a bluegrass band. And then it has a recipe for molasses crisps, and then one for molasses cake. Then there are some corn recipes, ash cake, skillet cornbread. Then it tells you about the corn shucking bees and what fun that was. How about some corn coffee? I know people are saying coffee is rising in price right now. What about corn coffee? You're going to have to read and find that out. It also tells you how to make corn oysters and corn dodgers. Talks about women's tasks, men's tasks, Bonnie's search for beauty. How to catch a man. You'll be an old maid. Lots of little folk tales. How to pick a wife. Don't trust a man. Now, I'll tell you, a lot of these are all in good jest. This is historical advice. Take it with a grain of salt. Tells you how they did courting in frontier style. The Saturday Night Bath, that is a funny story as well. Pioneer fashions, the $50 log cabin. And again, there's great little funny stories in between. Anything else? It does tell you at the end, stay with us and thanks. Again, he gives thanks to his wife for sharing her love of log cabins with him, as well as editing, food consultation, and wisdom. Gives thanks to so many people in this book. Right? A lot of people helped write this book and to bring it to you. There is in the back, before you even get to the list of sources, and he does, it's like end notes. There is a pioneer slang. It is 2 pages of these. So what does a gone coon? Someone who is ruined or lost. A whoop and a holler, a considerable distance. Arkansas toothpick, a Bowie knife. A ballot, say ballot. It almost looks like it's supposed to be ballet, but I think it's a ballot, which is a ballad. Blockader, a whiskey maker or moonshiner. It goes on. I'll let you look these up. Then again, there are the sources, and these are numbered out, giving you different books. I think it's books. Some could be interviews. I haven't quite looked them all up. And then it tells you more about native ground music, books of song and lore, music instruction, log cabin songs is a CD. Maybe not still a CD of many of the songs in the book. I'm going to hold this up in a section. You can see at some point I took to marking out which of these books I have, and oh no, there's a ton that I don't have yet. As soon as I get my hands on them, I will review them for you. God bless you, friends. I know I say these books, they're a hoot and a holler of history. If you enjoy history, and you want to enjoy history, this is a book for you. God bless you, friends.